My mother is a witch. My family is marked by fate. In our history, there are many tragic deaths, sudden, few diagnosed illnesses, and an impressive number that are considered inexplicable. From a young age, I realized that something in my home was different, and to some extent, I liked it, although I couldn't explain it. My father's name was Miguel Montes, and he had been in the real estate sales business for as long as I can remember. He often used to say that he wasn't good at almost anything, but he considered himself the best when it came to talking. He had an immense power of persuasion, which made him the top salesperson in his company, and he later became independent to avoid paying commissions to anyone. When I was a child, he worked for a real estate agency with branches in different states of the Republic, so we moved all the time. I would study at one school for a couple of months, 2 or 3 at another, and finish my school year at a different one. I'll never deny that it was complicated. Just as I made friends, I had to say goodbye to them, and there came a point where I stopped talking to my classmates in order to save myself a few tears on the day my father announced that we had to move to a different city. On the other hand, my mother's name is Sarah Montes, and for many years, she has worked as a professional counselor, although she doesn't have a degree in psychology or social work or any related field. Today, after what I discovered, I understand the reason, but back then, I didn't even ask about it. I remember that she used to choose a room in the house we were staying in and say, "This will be my study, no one can enter." Dad and I would nod without arguing. Not once did I feel curious to look behind the door of those spaces, but if I close my eyes, I can visualize the ladies who came to consult her. There were women with sad faces who, after hearing from Mrs. Sarah Montes, left with a smile. Indeed, as you may notice, I have 2 identical last names. I am Carlos Montes Montes, and this circumstance has an explanation. My parents are separated by several branches of the family, but in the end, they are distant cousins. At this moment, things still seem disconnected, but just as it happened to me, you will understand the justification for each strange circumstance that was before my eyes, and, I don't know why, I ignored. The life of moving from one place to another came to an end when I turned 11. One March evening, my mother prepared a delicious dinner. She served an amazing pork loin with sweet and sour sauce, accompanied by 3 cheese spaghetti and a citrus juice she squeezed herself. Initially, I felt like I was at a party. When we finished the meal, Mom got up and brought a small yellow box, which she handed to her husband with overflowing joy. Dad opened it eagerly, but his jubilant smile at receiving a gift began to fade. He took out a small white object, the size of a pen, in front of which he fell silent. I took that thing and saw that it had a kind of little screen with 2 red lines on it. After a few suspenseful moments in which Miguel Montes didn't say a word, Mom announced with infinite joy, "I'm pregnant. The baby will be born in October or early November. It's a universe's design." For me, it was the most beautiful news in the world. I would have a brother or sister to play with, and I wouldn't be alone anymore. I ran to hug my mother and rubbed her belly, even though it wasn't showing yet. Of course, I took the opportunity to introduce myself to the baby and said, "I'm Carlos, your brother. I promise to always protect you." My parents let me enjoy the news while I ate a big slice of cake, the dessert with which we ended the dinner. Then I saw that Dad took Mom by the arm, and they went to their room. I am sure now that he already knew what that baby would mean in their lives and tried to hide his displeasure so that I wouldn't get scared or think poorly of my family. But even if at that time I didn't know how serious the matter was, I understood that he wasn't happy. My first thought was that he was concerned about their age. I mean, he was 37, which wasn't a problem, but my mom was 35, a number already considered risky for a woman to give birth. Anyway, I didn't care about his reaction. I wanted a sibling to play football with or a sister to protect from kids who might pull her hair. That's why I decided to show the head of the household the benefits that would come with a new family member, and on every occasion, I would tell him how happy I was about this wonderful event. Strangely, my dad's attitude didn't change. In fact, the cheerful and vigorous salesman faded away until he disappeared. He always looked pale, lost too much weight, and couldn't regain it even with the help of a nutritionist. The constant moving came to an abrupt halt because Donna Sarah's husband, my father, needed continuous medical attention. He underwent countless tests, but none provided a definitive result. One doctor suggested diabetes, another ruled it out, claiming it was cancer. A third one came and said it wasn't that, but a simple anemia about to turn into leukemia, offering a prescription that promised to end his suffering. On one of his worst days, I overheard the eloquent Miguel Montes say, "No doctor knows what's happening to me, but I do. A witch is going to kill me because I didn't agree with her plans. That child shouldn't be born." Even if I overheard that by chance, I wanted to ask my father why he said it, but life decreed that such an event would not occur. That same afternoon, his body collapsed. His heart failed, and he had to be rushed to the hospital, where he passed away a few hours later. The next day, my mom gave me a black suit and took me to the cemetery to bury the man who fathered me. I saw him in the casket, and he didn't look like Miguel Montes, my dad, but like an elderly man whose life had reached its natural end. His once black hair had turned grayish, the smooth skin of his face was wrinkled, bony fingers stood out on his hands, and his once vigorous body seemed to have shrunk. My mother, in a black dress that accentuated the magical beauty of her stomach, received condolences with red eyes. When the gravedigger indicated it, she placed a white flower on the coffin and tossed a handful of earth, bidding farewell to her life partner. That night, I asked my mom to let me stay in her bed, and she agreed. I slept with one hand on her belly, and from time to time, I felt the movement of my future sibling. Until that moment, my parents hadn't wanted to know if it was a girl or a boy, so I didn't know either. The days following my father's death were gloomy, but also brought a positive change. I stopped seeing doctors coming in and out of our home. I became aware that we wouldn't have to move again, and the transition between elementary and middle school would be the last one where I'd have to leave my classmates. After so many years, I could make friends without fearing leaving them behind to move to another city. So, the remaining 2 months of my mom's pregnancy were characterized by a strange mourning in which, to be honest, no one was sad. Now that I'm older and have discovered what I will narrate later, I am aware of how abnormal that period was. My father was a good man. He was responsible, hardworking, and loving. Whenever I needed something, he helped me, no matter how difficult or tedious it was. He always treated Mom with chivalry. I never heard him raise his voice, and, in fact, I never witnessed a fight between them. What I remember about my parents is that they got along very well and loved each other very much. However, when Dad passed away, it seemed as if it had never been. After the burial, I didn't cry again, and soon, I found myself playing with the same joy I had before the funeral. Mom acted the same way. In the first few days, she wore black clothes, but soon she changed them for her beautiful floral dresses. On one occasion, she was asked why, and she said, "I have to set aside the sadness so it doesn't harm my baby." So, time passed. My dad made a good amount of money in his business, leaving us with savings and insurance that would allow us to live for several years without worry. Furthermore, Mom didn't stop seeing women who needed her help with their problems and charged them for her advice. Economically, we didn't feel the absence of the deceased family member. Anyway, before we knew it, October arrived, and with it, that windy atmosphere laden with the mysterious scent of the season: pan de muerto, bread of the dead, marigolds, lion's paw, copal, and offerings for the departed. On the night of October 31st, my mom touched my shoulder and told me to pack a bag because we had to go to the hospital. We left the house and had to walk amidst countless people dressed as skeletons, witches, demons, and other popular characters. Then we took a taxi that brought us to the hospital, where Sarah informed a nurse. "I have a scheduled delivery," she said. The young lady checked her computer and nodded with a smile. After that, I was taken to a room where they told me I could play, watch television, or have some dinner since there was a table with snacks and an entertainment center. In one corner, a clock indicated that it was 9 p.m. At around 11:30, I fell asleep, but resting in a strange place made me wake up around 3 o'clock in the morning. At that hour, I'm not sure if I heard correctly, but I perceived the cry of a baby, and to this day, I believe it was my sister's first breath, as indeed, it was a girl. I didn't realize when I fell asleep again. At dawn, a nurse came to visit me and told me I could go see my mom. I hurried over, still half asleep. In another room, my mother was waiting for me. She looked pale and tired. Next to her bed was a simple crib, and my little sister was sleeping peacefully in it. I saw her as the most beautiful thing in the universe. She was small, delicate, and calm, with beautiful eyelashes and small, pink lips. I turned to my mom with a smile from ear to ear, ready to express how happy I was. However, she was gazing at the ceiling as if she were bored. With just 12 years, I managed to realize that something was wrong, but the approach of adolescence prevented me from thinking too much about it. Instead of asking what was happening, I made a proposal. Can we name her Sonia? My mother said yes. We returned home 2 days later, and from that moment, things began to get complicated. My mom didn't take a maternity leave, but filled her schedule and resumed her counseling sessions. In the past, Dad and I were forbidden from entering her study, but my sister managed to sneak in with her crib. In the days to come, the chubby-cheeked girl started losing weight, her rosy cheeks faded, and she cried hour after hour. Even though I felt an intense love for Sonia, her constant crying irritated me. I endured as much as I could, but in the end, I complained, and my mom assured me that a doctor had seen her while I was at school, so the situation would change soon. And it did. My sister regained her health, gained some weight, and I fell in love with her sweetness all over again. Whenever I could, I held her against my chest and massaged her back, even if it was only for a few minutes, as it was better for her to stay in the steady crib since Mom tended to her clients almost all day. After about 4 months, the story repeated itself. Sonia started losing weight, refused to eat, and cried day and night. The doctor would examine her again while I was in high school, and after several days, she would recover. This became a routine. My sister would heal, then deteriorate slowly, her specialist would attend to her, she would regain her health, and later, she would plummet. We were back to square one. Fortunately, my mom's clients started to be women of excellent economic status, so she charged them double or triple. We never faced any problems covering the medical expenses. Or at least that's what Mrs. Sarah Montez said. As time passed, I advanced in my education, finished high school, and entered college. I turned 16, and my sister reached the age of 4. Many times I prepared myself to lose her, as her strange health seemed like a roller coaster. Sometimes she was radiant and beautiful, then she would deteriorate to a moribund state, but at the last minute, her body would recover as if it were a true miracle. The cycle became natural, and although it pains me to admit it, I stopped paying attention. Deep in my soul, I knew I could handle anything terrible that happened to her and that she would be all right. So, I focused on my studies and experiencing what a young man should before reaching adulthood. In those days, Diana appeared, a girl who joined my high school mid-year and soon became my girlfriend. With hormones raging, if my sister got sick again, I wouldn't even notice. I started spending more time outside the family home than in it, and my presence wasn't very necessary, as Mom took care of any incidents. She decided to give Sonia a private education to avoid adding an additional health factor from the outside. Multiple times, I saw my sister learning the alphabet in the dining room alongside Lucero Ruiz, a private tutor who treated her with gentleness and understood the fragility of her existence. However, she progressed very slowly in her lessons since Sonia's delicate health often required up to a month of pause before resuming somewhat normal activities. During that time, I was blind, a young man who claimed to love his sister and told anyone who would listen about the strength of a girl named Sonia, who, from her birth, had to dance with death and was still winning every piece performed by the orchestra of life. However, when I came home, I lost interest in what happened to that little one. I stayed in my room listening to music, playing video games, or talking on the phone with my girlfriend. My mother spent most of her time inside her study, and most of the time, Sonia was there too, because if she got sick, it would be easier to attend to her. At no point did I consider the possibility that my sister might interrupt a session that, as I imagined, was like psychological therapy. According to my observations, that never happened. Why? Children play, laugh, cry, and yearn to discover the vastness of the world. Anyway, I was 12 years older than my sister, an age difference that might seem small, but was the detail that led me to discover the strange things that ruled my house. I couldn't get into university. I took all possible exams and didn't get the required results to enroll. I applied for medicine and failed. I tried nursing and had no luck. I thought maybe engineering would be an option, but it wasn't. I used my last opportunity of the season on a public university, and I still couldn't make it for psychology. That summer, I secluded myself in my room and, even there, I found out how my friends started the most important stage of their lives. I was left behind. I watched them drift away, and my girlfriend left too. Alone, disappointed, and angry with myself, I began to wander the streets, discovered alcohol, some minor substances, and stumbled upon a curious thing. I was supposed to get along well with my mom and my sister, but I had been moving through the world alone for a long time. I always found money to pay for my tuition, supplies, and necessary things like clothing, shoes, and pocket money. In the fridge, there was never anything missing to heat up and eat. The house looked impeccable, without a speck of dust. However, my mother spent her time tending to her clients. What time did she do those activities? Furthermore, didn't she notice that I came home drunk and high? And if she did, wasn't she supposed to love me? At the very least, she should have given me a reprimand. We weren't a fractured family. Nonetheless, under the influence of certain happy cigarettes, I was able to accept a chilling reality. We shared a home without family ties. We believed we lived in a beautiful family, but we had none. Without explanation, my concerns blurred, much like the other intriguing topics in my life. However, in my wanderings, an acquaintance invited me to work with him in the city, and I decided to join him. The job involved selling door-to-door insurance, and I was inspired by my father, so I followed him for almost 3 weeks. During that time, I realized I had inherited my father's remarkable talent and ended up closing more deals than my friend, which meant better earnings for us. The move from the house where my mother decided to settle after her husband's death generated thoughts similar to those I experienced after a couple of happy cigarettes. I started to question Sarah Montez's attitudes, my sister's illnesses, and the maternal absence that contrasted with the clean spaces, freshly made food, and money available for whatever I wanted. I didn't know what it was, but I sensed unusual, almost malevolent behavior. That's why I decided to become independent, even though I was only 18 years old. Don't miss the second part of this great horror story. See you tomorrow to discover the fateful future that awaits Carlos and his sister at the hands of an unscrupulous witch.